swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Please have a seat, Ms McLaughlin. Yes, Mr. Boyle.
Sir, by way of background, as you know, I think we have some technical challenges this morning.
Yes.
I think that means that we won't have a live transcript, so apologies for that.
Understood.
Ms McLaughlin, could you give your full name, please?
Yeah, Lucy Elizabeth McLaughlin.
Thank you very much. Could we start, please, by having on screen MERP 201163. That's MERP 001163. Thank you. I think this is the first statement you gave to the Merseyside Police investigation. Do you recognise that?
Yeah.
Thank you. And can you confirm it's true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. Then could we have up MERP 30931? That's MERP 30931. I think you then came to give a more full statement to Merseyside Police, and do you recognise this as that statement?
Yes.
And is it again true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. And finally, PRE 201808. Thank you. I think this is the statement you gave to the inquiry. We can see it's dated the 18th of August 2025. Is that true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. Just last of all, can we have up the Pressfield chronology, which is PRE 001795. And again, can you confirm this is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you. Starting with your role, Ms McLaughlin, you've, I think, worked at Pressfield High School since 2014, correct?
That's right, yeah.
You became deputy head in March 2020.
Yes.
And head teacher in May 23.
Yes.
Thank you. As you progressed to your current role, have you been teaching in the classroom throughout that time?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And what do you teach?
So I teach a range of subjects. I teach GCSE English and history, but also I teach life skills, social communication, and some of the vocational subjects as well, like personal social development.
Thank you. And as deputy head teacher, which you were, I think, for at least the first period that AR was at Pressfield.
Yes.
What level of involvement would you have in the management of individual pupils?
So it varied from kind of pupil to pupil. So it's only a very small school, and we would kind of take on different responsibilities for different children. We had a head of sixth form who would oversee the Key Stage 5 provision. I tended to oversee the Key Stage 4 provision, and then we kind of shared the Key Stage 3 provision between us. If there was particularly tricky students that had a higher level of challenge, some of us would take on those students regardless of the key stage, and that would depend on who had the best relationship with the child, the best relationship with the parents, and who had the most kind of area of expertise in what the particular difficulties that child experienced.
Obviously, in terms of relationship with AR, he didn't come in very much. Presumably, no one had a particularly strong relationship with him. How was the kind of responsibility for him shared between the teachers and staff?
So because his level of attendance was so small, it was 0.7%, it kind of fell to the designated safeguarding lead because his main area of concern was his attendance at that time. When he first came to us, it was the head of sixth form who put in a range of different procedures to try and engage AR, but when they failed, it fell to the designated safeguarding lead. When they went out to do home visits and unfortunately weren't able to see AR, we kind of then, it would be who was available to go. We did kind of escalate who went with a member of staff, so it did appear that over time AR and his family would kind of work through a hierarchy, if that makes sense. So to begin with, it was his form tutor that went out when he failed to see AR and the family wouldn't let him in the home. We then asked the DSL to go. That was like another level of seniority. When that failed, we asked the Safe Schools officer to go with us. Then it kind of fell to who was available in the senior leadership team, and that sometimes fell to me.
Thank you. And so we've heard obviously from Ms Smith about the effort she made to get help and arrange the visits, and we'll come on perhaps to some evidence about Ms Dawson, who was the head of sixth form at the time of the transfer. Can I ask about your own level of involvement in the safeguarding side of work at Pressfield? So are you trained in that area?
I am currently, yes.
Yes. And were you at the time?
No.
Thank you. And what about CPOMs? Would you have access to the kind of two-factor authentication level?
So as deputy, and we've gone back and looked at this just to make sure, as deputy I didn't have the same level of access to CPOMs as the DSL because I wasn't a DSL at that time. However, now I do have that access, and so does the whole senior leadership team.
Thank you. We've heard from Ms Smith, but I think helpful to have in your own words just a very brief summary of Pressfield School.
So Pressfield School is a school for students with autism identified as their primary need. We go from the age of 11 through to 19, so there is a 3-year sixth form, and we deliver as much of the national curriculum as we can, but there are certain subjects disbanded. For instance, we don't deliver modern foreign languages. But if a child has a certain aptitude for that and a certain interest in that, we will look to deliver that and buy in tutors to deliver that as well. We cater for many students on the spectrum. So we have some students who have very limited language, and they will follow a Skills for Life curriculum, and their intended destination might be supported living. We then have other students who are extremely intelligent, and they'll go and they'll achieve really high grade GCSEs. We have started to deliver some A-levels in our sixth form as well, and we have students that go on to university, but we also then cater for everybody in and amongst there as well. A huge part of our curriculum is life skills, and we do kind of look at how we can support a child's social and communication and to help them move on into kind of employment or further education. We are an NAS, National Autistic Society approved school, advanced level as well, and we're going for our beacon status, so everything in the school is geared up to delivering a curriculum and teaching children on the spectrum in the best possible way. We have a number of breakout spaces, and we've got one sensory room that's used. We have a huge sensory curriculum as well, and each child is really treated as an individual. So whilst we have a number of curriculum pathways, there are children that will go across the curriculums because they might need a high level of sensory input, but for instance they might have a real skill in maths, and we wouldn't want to ever put a ceiling on anyone's achievement, so they would then go and access GCSE maths, for instance.
Thank you. Can I ask about the school's ability to handle pupils who've previously been excluded or come from PRUs? Was that commonplace for Pressfield?
No, students coming from a pupil referral unit is not common at Pressfield. Usually they'll come from a mainstream school or from a primary school with a base attached to it. But that's not to say we've never had a child from a pupil referral unit. It's just not commonplace, really.
Thank you. I want to ask, please, about the handover that was between Acorn School and Pressfield. You tell us at your paragraph 8 that the process of handover will begin with a request from a local authority for a placement. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And you say that, first of all, the EHCP will be considered and the school will consider whether the need of that student can be met, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Is this right? You could be obliged to accept a request for placement on an EHCP?
Yes.
But in practice, is there a process of discussion with the local authority?
So we try where we can to have those discussions with the local authority. So we have, when a placement request comes through, we have 15 days to respond to that request, which sometimes makes it really difficult to be able to go out and visit a child in their setting and in their school. And it's much easier if a child is in your local authority, because head teachers meet each other at different meetings and we'll have those discussions around a child and whether we believe we can meet their needs. Where it's across a local authority, we don't have that same opportunity to do it. When the placement request comes in, it does go to the head teacher initially, and what happened in the case of AR, because the placement was for a September start within the sixth form, the placement request went to the head of sixth form, who at the time did liaise with the senior leadership team to say, I think we can meet the need, does everybody agree? We looked at the paperwork.
Let's do that step by step. So I first wanted to ask you about the EHCP, and you say that was received before the replacement was offered. Can we have that on screen, please? So LCC 30139. So just for the benefit of your note, we have seen another version of this, LCC 30132.
132, thank you very much.
So there are a number of versions of this EHCP, which we'll come to, but is this the sort of front page that you would normally see on an EHCP you receive from Lancashire County Council?
From Lancashire, yes.
Thank you. Could we move to page 5, please?
Just while we're doing that, could somebody from behind the screens come and see if they can get this page up on my screen? I just have a moving box that says invalid format. But Mr. Boyle, carry on for the time being.
So if I read things, then perhaps I can...
No, it's fine. Carry on.
Thank you. So, sorry, if we just zoom out, the reason I'm pulling up this page is it's the communication and interaction section of the EHCP, and if we could then go over to page 6. So we see the EHCP with quite a lot of editing in red, struck through, some wording in bold with dates and others not. Can I ask, what would you see when you got an EHCP?
So when I see an EHCP like this with the striking through, we're told we're not to really consider the strike through, because when the final amended EHCP comes through, that won't be on it. So that's to be deleted. So this plan hasn't been finalised by the local authority. Yeah. When it would be finalised, it would come through without the strike through on there. So that would be historic, and then what's been put in as a result in the bold and the red is what's to be considered now.
Yeah. So is this then a document which is partway through the process of editing?
Yeah, it's not been finalised yet.
I should add, it is signed and dated at the end,
but,
and perhaps we need to disregard that. So you wouldn't see a version with editing like this when it comes to you?
Not usually, but sometimes we do. In the case of AR, we did have some of the strike through on there.
And are you able to remember, I know we're talking about a sort of point of detail for some time ago, but do you have any memory of what was actually on AR's EHCP in terms of the level of editing?
There was a lot of editing on there, and when considering his placement, we did look at some of the things that were taken out, but you're not allowed to consider that, and for that to be a reason to kind of change your mind on a placement. And from what I can remember, there was actually very little information regarding his history or regarding AR's kind of needs, really, other than communication and interaction.
So you weren't involved in the process of editing, it happened before it came to you, but just as we have this on screen, and we've previously seen one version with some level of amendments, but I think if we look at this copy, we can see quite heavy redacting. For example, he does not like perceived injustice has been struck out and corrected with AR has a good sense of right and wrong, but requires support to work through scenarios where an injustice may have occurred. Then the next paragraph, I think the original wording would have been the educational psychologist reports that AR does not always make eye contact, and it's been changed to say AR does not always find it easy to make eye contact. And then looking at the next paragraph, strike out, it's also reported that if another pupil said something he did not agree with, he would, and then originally it would have said struggle to accept. And it's instead been changed, say, in line with his ASD diagnosis, he can struggle to accept other people. We see next paragraph, his thinking is very black and white, is crossed out, and AR was unable to let go of any form of perceived injustice, again crossed out as already mentioned above. If we could go over the page, please. Then we see, I think, at the top of this page, a section we've already seen redacted, where by or struck through, where it originally said there were concerns of occasions where AR would say and do things which have been described as sinister. In the last version we saw that had been struck through, sinister had been struck through and replaced with inappropriate. In this version, that entire section has been crossed through. We see the cold and calculating reference, which I think had been struck through in the version we saw before. And then going one paragraph below, the suggestion that AR was unable to let go of any real or perceived injustice, and his father believes that if AR is respected by others, there will be no difficulties, but if something is said to him, then he will react, has been crossed out. And then it says AR, instead of has difficulty, can have difficulty managing when things go wrong, and then becomes angry, is struck out and replaced with can become frustrated. So we see, I think, the wording Miss Hodson used was toned down. I think we can see that here, can't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Could we just go to page 11, please? Thank you. So we see added in red, he's no longer under the yacht team. Parents request that this section is removed as not relevant as current involvements from CFWS. So we can see there was a section there on his involvement with the yacht, and suggestion seems to be that AR's parents wanted reference to the yacht removed because he was not involved, it was no longer relevant. From your perspective, if that edited information had not been, or let's just start again, was that edited information relevant to your assessment?
Yeah, it is relevant to our assessment, absolutely. I think even in the editing, the detail would have needed to be clearer. I think it's important when you understand a student with autism and we talk about perceived injustice, that in itself is not detailed enough for us to make an accurate assessment. A perceived injustice could be someone pushing in front of you in a queue and not being able to let that go. So that in itself wouldn't be a reason for us to say we can't meet the need. In the kind of, in AR's circumstances, the perceived injustice was much more elevated and that detail needed to be in there.
Yeah. So even without the edits, what is still missing from this document is detail about the previous incidents AR had been involved in, for example, going back to the range with the hockey stick, carrying the knife into the range, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The sense of intent is not clear anywhere in the educational healthcare plan, and that intent really needs to be made clear in there.
Thank you. I think it does say that he has a tendency to strike out, we've seen,
Yep.
but we don't have any information about knives, I don't think, in
No.
this, do we?
And again, when you're looking at a child with autism and in our setting, everybody is team teach trained, which means we will hold a child if they're in crisis, might hurt themselves or hurt others. Striking out could be a gentle hit on the shoulder. It doesn't, it's too ambiguous language for us to get a clear picture of how AR presented.
So you might be able to meet the need of a child that was at risk of striking out.
Yes.
How would that be different for a child that was at risk of carrying a knife?
Because if a child is striking out when they are in crisis, there's no intent there.
Sorry, let me put that question better. What would your response be to knowing that the child had a history of carrying a knife?
If a child had a history of carrying a knife, that's not something our setting would be able to meet the need of, particularly where there's intent to hurt somebody with that knife. That's not my school, and the children there are extremely vulnerable. If we'd have had that information, we would not have been able to meet AR's need.
Thank you. Just one point on this, which I think is, you say in your statement at paragraph 10 that you were aware of the knife incident at the range school. Maybe if we have, please, page 3, paragraph 10. Sorry, it's PRE 201808. Thank you. Page 3, paragraph 10. So you say, I was aware from reading the EHCP of the knife incident at the range school. I think having looked through that EHCP, it's not referred to. Do you know where you got that information?
There was a document that's, when you get a placement request, you don't just get the EHCP, you do get some subsidiary documents as well. There was another document that came with that mentioned the knife incident at the range. There was no mention in that document of the intent to use it, and from what other people have said around AR's intent and how he then presented with it. That's the key missing piece of information for us as to make a judgment of whether we can meet the need of a child. It is around the intent and the intent to use that.
Thank you. So, I mean, you go on to say that the knife incident did not consider this in isolation to be a reason for refusal. Do we take from that that just carrying a knife wouldn't necessarily be a reason for refusal, but that if you'd known that he'd said, for example, that he intended to use it, that would have caused a rethink?
Yeah, it is the intent in which they had to use that weapon would make the difference in that. And also the kind of knife they were carrying. So at this point, we had no idea what kind of knife that was, but there have been other occasions where a child might have carried a butter knife, and that's very different than carrying a kitchen knife that you would use to chop vegetables, for instance. And if a child's carrying a butter knife for protection, is very different than carrying a knife used to chop vegetables in a kitchen with the intent of using it to harm somebody.
Are you able to remember what the subsidiary documentation was? Are we talking about a cover letter or a risk assessment?
It wasn't a risk assessment, it was a table. I can't really remember the entirety of it. I only briefly glanced at it, and it was just on there, and it stated that around the fact that his perceived injustice was around him being bullied at the range, and it was racist bullying.
Okay. Just in terms of the EHCP's role in passing on that risk information, is it the purpose of the EHCP to allow you to risk assess the risk that someone like AR presents to other pupils?
Absolutely, that's the only information we can go off to say whether we can meet the need of that child in our provision without that risk document in there and that history of what that child has been through. I can't ensure that my provision is appropriate or that I'm putting in the right measures to ensure that they're safe and everybody else in the building is safe.
So this isn't just about measures that you might put in place to safeguard someone once they arrived. It's about knowing whether you actually can put those measures in place at all.
Yes.
Yeah. We heard some evidence from Mr. Turner of Lancashire County Council, who said that actually in their EHCP document there wasn't really an obvious place to put that sort of information. Have you seen EHCPs which do include that information?
Yes. So each local authority has different formats for an educational healthcare plan. So whilst it's mandatory to have sections A, B, C, etc., how that's presented is down to the local authority. So as a head teacher, you will see a vast number of formats of educational healthcare plan. Where I've seen it previously would be in the history, and in AR's history, it's very short in the educational healthcare plan, whereas in other provisions that comes right at the front and it will outline an entire young person's history right from the time they got their educational healthcare plan to the current day. And I would have expected, given such vast movement within AR's education and significant incidents, that would be in that history to allow us to see what AR has been through and what we need to do, whether we can meet that person's need in our school.
So just talking about the formatting of the EHCP,
Yes.
do you see other formats which are better at passing this information on?
Better than Lancashire, yes.
Yeah. Would it be helpful to have a kind of standardised approach?
Absolutely. As a head teacher, when you're looking at formats from Manchester, the Wirral, Knowsley, Lancashire, Sefton, and they're also vastly different, it makes it really difficult. And also the quality assuring of those educational healthcare plans, you're relying on different local authorities then to quality assure an educational healthcare plan through the quality assurance panel. Which I've sat on before, and we do quality assure for Sefton. If you had a standardised format, you could then quality assure across local authorities, which would then improve working together across local authorities and close any gaps that might be there.
And you could oblige, when they're completed, for risk information to be included with a specific section for that?
Yeah, you could do, yeah.
Thank you. Moving on then to AR's acceptance for his place at Pressfield. So we've had the EHCP. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, there was a visit, is that right?
To AR at Acorns.
Yes. So
yes.
Miss Dawson, head of sixth form, I think, met AR and Miss Allred, who we've heard about.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Thank you. And I think you say that is an opportunity to discuss the student with the current teachers and ask, what do we need to know?
Yep, it is, yeah.
I think you say that actually at the meeting between Miss Dawson and Miss Allred, there wasn't a transfer of that risk information.
No, there wasn't.
That's at your paragraph 8. And we have a statement from Miss Dawson who says at that meeting no concerns were voiced. So that will be summarised later, but for your note it's PRE 001807.
Thank you.
And the email that we see from Miss Dawson accepting the place says, I believe that we can meet AR's needs after reading his EHCP and meeting AR. So that was the information that was taken on board. So that's PRE 4025.
Thank you.
Continuing with the chronology, the formal enrolment of AR was on the 28th of March 2020.
Yep.
But we saw in evidence that around that time there was a significant amount of information passed by the Acorns to Pressfield School, correct?
Yes, to the designated safeguarding lead.
Yeah, so, I mean, we went through this in evidence with Miss Smith, but first of all, There was the discussion on the 21st of March, which included the fact that AR had run away from home with a kitchen knife with a plan to stab someone. There was the sending of the CPOM notes, which, as we covered again with Miss Smith, included all the data that we know is in there. And that was, I think, also transferred not just by egress, but also on the CPOM system, correct?
It could have been. It was never requested to be transferred on CPOMs. So we didn't actually get that information through the CPOM system.
Right. I thought Miss Smith's evidence was that it had been sent but overlooked.
No, it did not. It had not been sent through CPOMs. It didn't get requested until March. It's actually never been requested on CPOMs as an AR's information, because by the time Mrs. Smith realised it was there, he'd left. It
Understood.
was September 24.
So is that a mechanism in the software whereby Pressfield actually requests the records?
So with CPOMs, it's quite clear. It's very user-friendly in terms of requesting information. A student's name comes up on the screen. Next to it is a button that says Request Transfer. You would click that button. The other school then would click the button on their system that says Authorise Transfer, and then it gets transferred straight through to your system and you can see everything. Mrs. Smith hadn't pressed the request button.
Thank you. We also saw emails that Mrs. Smith was copied into an attempt to get further information from CAMS following the incident on the bus on the 17th of March. And we know, I think, from your evidence that in April 2020, a risk assessment profile was sent through by the Acorns, which again we looked at in evidence with Miss Smith, correct?
Yeah.
We're not hearing evidence from Miss Dawson or Miss Allred. Are you able to help us with the kind of paradox between the fact that the suggestion that in January no information was shared and then the information that we can see was shared in March?
So AR's original placement request was for the September 22, not for the March. So he was coming to join us in the sixth form when his year 11 place had ended at Acorns. In between that time, when his placement was given in January, when Mrs. Dawson said we can meet the need in January, his attendance, we were led to believe, dropped at Acorns because he'd become disengaged due to wanting to start at Pressfield. Miss Aldred got in contact with Mrs. Dawson to say, is there any way the placement can start earlier due to him becoming further disengaged? Mrs. Dawson had a look. We couldn't accommodate AR in year 11 because our year 11s were doing on study leave, working towards their GCSEs in March. It wouldn't have been appropriate to put him in the year 11 class. They would have also left at the end of June, along with many year 11s across the country. So Mrs. Dawson looked at whether she could accommodate AR in the sixth form. She felt she could, so therefore a placement, we agreed an enhanced transition, which is very, very unusual. It's not something we usually do. An enhanced transition for AR was agreed to keep him engaged and try and increase his attendance. So therefore he would have come to sessions with ourselves whilst remaining on the role of Acorns. However, when that was agreed, Acorns did say, could he come on your role and become part of your school, because that would be better for AR. He'd then feel part of your community. We looked at it and we agreed that he could take the place in March. This was done very quickly, so therefore that's why the information then got sent, because the placement was agreed to start earlier than the original September.
So there was an accelerated process.
Yes.
But I think that the information was shared around the time that AR was officially enrolled.
Yes.
And so one thing I'm wondering about is the kind of obligation on schools to share this sort of information before an offer of placement is made.
There is no obligation in terms of safeguarding information. That wouldn't usually come through until a child is on your roll. You're not entitled to that information.
And can I just understand, where you say safeguarding information here, would that include the risk that a child presents to other pupils as well as the risk to themselves?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we heard from Ms. Lewis that the practice is that the safeguarding information normally comes after the move happens. We'll hear from Ms. Dixon, but I think the kind of requirements are that the common transfer file must be transferred within 15 days of a pupil ceasing to be registered. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And then the child protection file has to be transferred within 5 days of an in-year transfer or within the first 5 days of the start of a new term. Is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Thank you. But I think Ms. Dixon says, so, and it's her paragraph 38,
Thank you.
DFE 30256, that since the guidance in keeping children safe in education 2018 onwards, it advised designated safeguarding leads to consider if it would be appropriate to share any information with the new school in advance of the child leaving. So is this right? There's a discretion to share before, but no obligation.
Yes, and that can't be shared on the CPOM system. So you couldn't ask for the CPOMS file early because you can only request it once a child is on your management information system. So that would happen when they're enrolled. So you could have a conversation with somebody. They could then pass you paper copies if they've got paper copies, or they could download the CPOMs and send it you securely, but you can't request it through the system until they're enrolled.
But that's maybe a kind of technical barrier.
Yes.
The guidance says that it can be done, but doesn't oblige that to happen.
Yeah.
We've obviously explored the EHCP route, but this might be another way that the school could get information about someone before they're transferred, correct?
Absolutely. It would be really helpful if in their educational healthcare plan there was a level of understanding around the safeguarding concerns around that child, whether it's to them or what they pose to others. The EHCP really is an integral document in ensuring everybody's working together to make sure we are providing the care the child needs, but also safeguarding them and safeguarding others.
So particularly for Pressfield, where I assume most new pupils, if not all, have an EHCP.
Every child in our school has an EHCP, yeah.
But if we were to think about mainstream schooling or PRUs, this is another way in which this safeguarding information could be shared before transfer, but there's no obligation to do it, correct? Yeah. Do you know why that is?
I don't think you're entitled to that information until they're on your roll. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm not sure.
Moving on to the egress, we've covered in evidence the oversight by Ms. Smith, but of course that occurred at a time where she was suffering from ill health and had some difficulties in her personal life. Shouldn't there have been arrangements for covering her while she was on leave?
Yes, there should have been. We did have a deputy DSL at the time, and I know his email was also sent to Acorns, but the information wasn't sent to him at the time. It was just to Miss Smith.
Yeah, but I mean, shouldn't there have been a process when she went on sick for checking her emails?
Yes, there should, yeah.
And we also know that AR's CPOMs being missed was not an isolated incident. There were 53 other children who'd had that information missed.
Yes.
And I think Ms. Smith said that she'd asked for more training and help when CPOMs was introduced, but that hadn't been provided. Were you aware of that?
So actually there was training provided for Miss Smith. There are records of transfer training for her, and along with evidence of her transferring files prior to AR and after AR's attendance, and then that stopped in 2020, partway through 2022, she stopped transferring information, but she did have that training, and there's evidence of her doing that.
So are you able to address why that might have happened? Was it a workload issue?
I I don't know why that happened. I would be assuming.
And are the fail-safe mechanisms in place now to prevent it from happening again?
Absolutely. My entire senior leadership team are DSLs now. We all have access, the elevated access to CPOMs, so everybody can request the transfer of information. We have calendar dates in there as reminders, just in case you're busy and things slip your mind. We have calendar reminders in there of when the key transfer dates are, particularly around our Year 7 starters and new starters at the beginning of a term. But we've also got a number of us that are doing that now. We also have regular meetings as a team to discuss children coming through, and when we're looking at a placement request and we're saying we can meet their need, we're then discussing it with the wider team rather than keeping it in isolation, so that we know there's a number of us that know that information needs to be requested by this date.
Thank you. The other route of this risk information coming from the Acorns to Pressfield was the risk assessment documents. Yes. That I took Miss Smith through, so it's LCC 30707. Now that did refer to AR's history with knives, didn't it? It referred to the range incident and the fact that he'd been bringing a knife into school, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. You tell us at your paragraph 11 that the document was printed off and taken to the head teacher for consideration. A copy was provided to Miss Smith as DSL and was uploaded to CPOMs the day after her return from work.
Yeah.
At that stage, Pressfield did have, didn't it, the kind of full information that it needed to assess AR's risk?
We had the risk assessment from Acorns. We didn't have the CPOMs at that time, which went into a lot of detail, but there was a level of detail in the risk assessment that was passed to the previous head teacher and to Mrs. Smith. And yes, there was enough information in there for us to make some changes to how we risk assessed AI.
So the CPOMs had quite a lot of information about AR's day-to-day behaviour at the Acorns.
Yes.
Mentioned the prevent referrals.
Yeah.
You know, him asking for a picture of a severed head in an art class by way of example.
Yeah.
The risk assessment had more about AR's history in terms of him taking the hockey stick back to the range,
yes.
etc.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've given some explanation of this in your statement. Could we have up on screen, please, page 5 of that statement, PRE 001808. Thank you. So you talk about a record here. Am I right? Was this an investigation after the attack by Pressfield as to what had happened with information sharing?
Yes.
And you quote from it, on a third occasion, Acorn sent a summary risk assessment. This was opened and read. It gave the view that AR had behaved without incident during the, and if we could just turn over the page, please, previous 12 months and now presented low risk. However, the full implications of his previous history may not have been fully appreciated at Pressfield. The summary risk assessment is the document referred to above. The document includes a scoring rating against various risks. The conclusion drawn by the youth offending team was that AR was low risk. From a school perspective, AR was not low risk and should not have been categorised as such. So you read through that risk assessment and you agreed that low risk was not the message that Pressfield should have been taking from that document, correct?
Absolutely. I read through the risk assessment in July 2024, not at the time it was given us. But absolutely, it should never have been considered as low risk from that risk assessment.
While that investigation is right to say that the yacht assessed AR as low risk, that's not really a true reflection of the document, is it?
No, it's not.
We saw, by contrast, Pressfield's risk assessments, which had none of that information in, correct?
That's absolutely right.
So again, brought up in Ms. Smith's evidence, but PR 001741. And I think you accept, as Ms. Smith did, that those risk assessments were inadequate against the background that we see in the Acorns risk assessment, correct? this was a third issue, perhaps. We've got the CPOMS transfer, the egress. This was a third time where Pressfield didn't take into account information that was being passed to it. Are you able to explain why that is?
Whilst Acorns had sent the egress, it hadn't been opened. We hadn't requested the transfer. The summary risk assessment that had been sent had been read and uploaded, but hadn't been further shared. So when every child in Pressfield has a risk assessment, so it's not unusual that risk assessments are written. Form tutors are responsible for writing those risk assessments up until I became head. Then children who presented more of a risk have an enhanced risk assessment that the senior leadership team write and review, and we co-produce that with parents. Also, every child, whether it's the senior leadership team or the form tutor that writes the risk assessments, we do co-produce it with parents and other agencies that might be working with that child. So at that time, it would be the form tutor's role to write the risk assessment for AR. They went off the information that was in the EHCP that they were privy to. They weren't privy to any of the other information there.
So the Acorns risk assessment was not properly shared amongst Pressfields. And are you able to say why that was?
I don't know why that wouldn't have been shared. That's not practice now at Pressfield. At the time, the DSL was wholly responsible for safeguarding. It did kind of sit with one person. That has changed now. We have got more than one DSL in the building, and we've got a much more transparent system of working to ensure the safety of everybody in the building. I think it's a culture shift.
So I think Ms. Smith said that the information came to her from Miss Dawson, and she wasn't sure why Miss Dawson also hasn't shared it, although she accepted her share of responsibility for passing it on too. Are there systems in place to ensure that these risk assessments are properly shared now?
Absolutely. Mrs. Dawson was following the process at the time. So at the time, the process was pass that on to the DSL. The DSL will then tell you what you need to know and what you need to do with that. So Mrs. Dawson followed that process. Now, that's not the process or the culture within the school. It's got a very open culture, a very transparent culture. We hold regular CPD sessions where we talk about children on different plans with the school body to make sure everybody knows what's needed to support the children at the time.
Can I ask you, you say, I think quite candidly in your statement that the school was looking at AR in terms of the risks to him rather than posed by him, and that narrowed professional curiosity, so paragraph 25. Was that the problem here? There was a focus on the risk to AR, not from him?
Yes, I think so. I think our professional curiosity was narrowed because we were looking at him as a vulnerable child, and without having seen the information that was in the CPOMs and taken into consideration the summary risk assessment that not everybody had access to, we did narrow our judgment, and it was quite often people doing the home visits who didn't have access to that information, and we were looking at him as a vulnerable child.
Is there a risk that this sort of information is deliberately kept as a kind of close hold because people are worried about the sensitivity or worried about sharing safeguarding information because it contains personal details about a child? Did you have any sense of that? I
think historically that would have been a possibility. It's absolutely not now. And I trust my staff to have that kind of professionalism to take into consideration the risks that children pose as well as what is posed to them.
Yeah. And can I ask you about the counterfactual? So if the EHCP had contained the full risk information, if the CPOMs had been accepted and processed properly, and if the risk assessment had had the same treatment, how would things have been different at Pressfield?
We wouldn't, if we'd have seen the information, we wouldn't have offered a place to AI. We don't have the skill set to manage that situation. That is beyond our skill set. That's not an ASC provision that person needed, and that's our area of expertise, not AI's behaviours. They aren't our area of expertise. We would never have had the skill set to support them.
And just playing that forward slightly, say that he has been given a place and then the CPOM's information had been received, what would the response have been then?
It would have been completely different. We would have been looking to meet with Lancashire as soon as possible to talk about the fact that because we would still have been in the situation where if we'd got it afterwards, we would have thought we couldn't meet that person's needs, and we would have started the process as soon as possible of finding a provision that could meet AR's needs. That would never have been us. We wouldn't have had AR on our site, on our school site, because of the risk he would have posed to some of our extremely vulnerable children in the building. If he would have had to come on our school site, and I really don't think he would have had to, but if he had, we would have absolutely been searching and wanding him to make sure it was safe that he was coming into the building. But we would have escalated the process of the annual review to look at a suitable provision for him, and that was not Pressfield.
Obviously, if you'd taken him off the role at Pressfield, it would have then been Lancashire's responsibility to revisit the EHCP and consider where he should go. But from your experience, do you have any idea about what might have happened next?
The only way we could have taken him off our role would be to permanently exclude him, and we wouldn't have had a reason to permanently exclude him. I can't permanently exclude him for what he's done previously. Yeah. So I wouldn't have been able to take him off our role legally without doing that.
Sorry, let me rephrase that slightly. In your discussions then with Lancashire, once you knew this information, you'd been looking for him to go elsewhere because he wasn't suitable for Pressfield.
Yep.
Do you have any idea about where that might have been?
The provision that he would have gone to? No, I don't know the provision that he would have gone to. I know that we have worked with some children who have posed a risk and they've gone to a secure educational provision. Whether that would have been appropriate for AI is a possibility.
Thank you. Very quickly on internet usage, AR, I think, was provided with a Chromebook when he joined Pressfield, but he never used it. Is that
No,
right?
he didn't.
Thank you. Moving on to steps taken to re-engage or engage AR, as you said, his attendance at Pressfield was 0.7%. Is Pressfield used to dealing with very low levels of attendance?
No, not at all.
Okay. And in terms of methods that Pressfield used to secure AR's attendance, could you just briefly run through what those were?
Yeah, so we offered AR different slots to come into school. So there was times that he came in and played basketball, for instance, with his form tutor to get a feel for the building, to build those positive relationships. He'd come in when it was his favourite lunch, so he would come in and have pizza, again with his form tutor, to build those positive relationships. When AR's father said the classroom was too busy, we then took him out of the classroom and he was taught one-to-one in a room. At first we moved the room around because it's very difficult to have a room dedicated to one person in our provision. But when AR's father said that wasn't working, he needed the same room, we did dedicate the room to AR. He also got specialist input from our speech and language therapist and from our occupational therapist. He would come in and play chess with our occupational therapist in an attempt to build relationships so that we could look at increasing engagement and time in school. In addition to this, we focused his curriculum around his areas of interest, what he wanted to look at. So we had a very bespoke timetable that didn't follow the rest of the sixth form provision. We also went out and picked him up at home and brought him in when he wouldn't come in with his dad. We then looked at the transport of coming in. We offered to take him for walks in the local community as another method of trying to engage and build those relationships as well. And when those attempts all failed, we then went down the home visiting route.
So you conclude, I think, in your statement that you tried everything to get him through the door, and you were certain that the steps taken to engage were more than adequate. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So paragraphs 39 to 40 of the statement. In terms of the welfare checks, did you say that you took part in some of the home visits?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And can you remember those?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
were you able to see AR?
No.
And why was that?
Quite often I couldn't get in the house. AR's mum would say, not today, no, you're not seeing him, and kind of push us away from that. Sometimes there was no answer at the door. One time I managed to get into the lounge. AR refused to come down and refused to be seen. So there was no way to see him.
Were you given reasons why you couldn't see AR?
Sometimes he was sleeping. Sometimes he just did not want to see us.
Okay. You sought assistance from other agencies, and we've heard Ms. Smith's evidence on that. I think you say in your statement that you didn't consider the response, for example, from Lancashire Police to be adequate, and we've heard Mr. Corey's evidence about the right care, right person, so paragraph 42.
Thank you.
And at paragraph 44, you talk about the response from Children Missing Education at Lancashire County Council, and an email which suggested that AR was above compulsory school age and that he was on the school roll. Mm-hmm. Therefore, there was no action for them to take. What was your view of that?
I think if a child's got an educational healthcare plan, whether they're above statutory school age or not, there's a reason they've got an EHCP up until the age of 25 and therefore should be treated as though they're not above statutory school age. They are a vulnerable person and therefore they should be monitored in the same way a child of statutory school age is, which is why we did continue to do the home visits, even though you're not necessarily required to do so.
There was an attempt, I think, by your predecessor as headmaster, Mr. Fay, to take AR off the roll, correct? Yes. Are you able to say what the motivation was for taking that step? Because
it was quite clear by that point that we weren't going to be able to meet AR's needs. What AR's father would talk to us a lot about was his anxiety and his mental health, and we are not a mental health specialist school, and therefore we wouldn't, and the measures that often an ASC provision take aren't in line with what somebody with SEMH would need, and therefore can be sometimes counterproductive. So therefore what Mr. Fay was trying to do was almost force Lancashire's hand to find a provision that we felt at the time would be able to support AR.
Thank you. And AR was obviously risky at this time and isolated.
Yes.
What was the expectation of what would happen? So you're saying LCC you wanted to force their hand?
Yeah, we wanted them to find an appropriate provision that would be able to support AR and his family so that he would be able to get the help he needed.
And the school's view that AR wasn't attending because of mental health issues, was that who provided that message? Did you say it was from AR's parents?
That was, very much the narrative around AR's needs very much came from AR's dad. We didn't have very much contact with AR's mum, but his dad would provide the narrative and would attend certain workshops that the school put on for parents that focused on mental health. So AR's dad, for instance, would come in for a sleep workshop to look at how to support AR in his sleeping pattern, all the while leading us to believe that he needed much more support with his mental health than his ASC.
And what about CAMS? Did you have any input from them in that respect?
We did have some meetings with CAMS, very little meetings with CAMS. When we had meetings along with AR's parents and other professionals, AR's parents wouldn't allow school to be present when they were talking about health or his mental health. They would shut the meeting down.
So you say at your paragraph 46 that AR's parents positively prevented the sharing of information. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So did you see in this meeting evidence of a barrier to the school receiving information from CAMS?
Yes, absolutely.
And is there any route for the school to get that information regardless of the parents' wishes?
So we did try to contact CAMS. We tried to contact them sometimes because we'd failed to see AR and we wanted to know if they'd seen him to make sure he was safe. But the communication between ourselves and CAMS was not great. We didn't get very much information at all.
Thank you. And aside from the issue of what the parents were giving permission to share, do you know why that was?
No.
And is that a common experience?
No, it's not really. We've got some really good relationships with CAMS that have been very, very successful with other children. But we usually have the same CAMS worker working with our children, so we can reach out to them. You know, we're not afraid to reach out and just ask the question, and we've got those good relationships. We'd never worked previously with the CAMS workers that were working with AR, and that relationship just wasn't there. We just didn't really get that information back.
Thank you. I just wanted to finalise AR's period at Pressfield. So we raised the issue of trying to take AR off the roll and the engagement between Pressfield and LCC. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of correspondence between Pressfield and LCC, is that right?
Yeah, there was. And there was a lot of times when AR went from one SEN caseworker to another when we hadn't been told. There's an email thread where people are asking to be removed from the email thread because they're no longer working with AR. But we were desperate in that we had no idea who was kind of responsible for his plan within the local authority. And I think at one point we were copying many people into the email just to try and get an answer.
So I just want to pull up one example of this, which is PRE 30152. And if we could go, please, to page 2, and we just see at the bottom of that page, this is an email from Mr. Fay, previous headmaster, to Sharon Rowland at LCC. If we could then go over the page. Thank you. We see Mr. Fay has tried to ring, and there appears to be some confusion re AR and his lack of place, and his place or lack of at Pressfield. If we could then go back to page 2 and follow the chain upwards. Thank you. Sorry, I think we'll need to go to page 1. Clearly, there's been a conversation here between Miss Rowland and Mr. Fay. I appreciate that my response is a statutory response. The local authority view AR is on the roll as a Year 12 student in Pressfield School. If we could go over the page, please. Named on his EHCP. I appreciate that you've stated to the local authority that you feel you cannot meet need. And Ms. Rowland then asks for demonstration of this versus via annual review documentation, and that would need to be evaluated. And if we go then please to the first page in Mr. Fay's reply, and just zoom into the body of that. He says that there was a review on the 7th of July when the placement being terminated was discussed. And you'll see correspondence to Mr. Calderbank informing him this was the case. You'll see the amount of attempts to seek clarification from lengths we tried. I'm sure you will also understand the frustration we have felt with the SEND department and their lack of engagement. And he refers to calls and messages unanswered. While I appreciate staff turnover and poor communication between teams may have contributed to this situation, we've tried to be proactive in the best interests of AR. I don't believe I can say the same for Lancs. And he goes on to refer the fact that there was no attendance at that review in 22 and no response to a letter, which was back in July 22, which I think was asking or saying that AR would be taken off the roll, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So just for your notes, that letter is LCC 30178, in which Mr. Fay, in quite strong terms, registers, one, the need to take AR off the roll, and two, takes issue with the amount of engagement.
Thank you.
That perhaps is consistent with the evidence that you've given today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to finalise this, so funding for AR was withdrawn on the 20th of March 2024. That was appealed by AR's father, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Is this right? Have you seen correspondence in which there's a concern that removing AR from the roll would affect the family financially because it would impact their entitlement to benefits?
Yeah, and they stated as well that if we could leave him on our roll but give the place to somebody else. So there was never the intention that AR would step foot in the building. They just wanted him on our roll.
Thank you. So the reference for that email is PRE 201298.
Thank you.
Finally, AR was informed he was no longer on the roll on the 12th of June 24 and formally removed on the 27th of June 2024, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions for you. I'll just see if anyone else does.
Yes, Mr. Byrne.
Just one very quick point. PRE 001808, page 3, sir. You mention an internal inquiry into the email at paragraph 28. Has that internal inquiry been completed?
No, it's still ongoing.
Okay. Do you know when it will be completed?
We are hoping it will be completed by the end of this year, by December. It had to pause for a period of time.
So a process has begun?
It absolutely has begun, yeah.
Right, well, okay. And will you be happy to share that with the inquiry as and when it's complete?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Byrne. I'm very sorry you're... yes, sorry, Mr.
Forgive me interrupting.
No, not at all.
I'm grateful. I ask questions on behalf of the families of the surviving children. Just 3 very brief areas, please. Home visits. It's perfectly clear that despite repeated efforts, you and your staff were very frequently unable to see AR at home.
Absolutely.
I just want to ask you about one particular occasion on the 3rd of May of 2022. And for your reference, sir, it's PRE 4037.
Thank you very much.
On that occasion, did AR's form teacher, James Berry, try to perform a home visit?
I think so.
And on that occasion, did AR's father open the door and give Mr. Berry a warning?
Yes, sorry, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
And was that warning that AR may become violent and may attack Mr. Berry if AR was forced to see him?
Yes.
And that was reported back to you?
It wasn't. It was reported back to the DSL, I think, and reported on CPOMS, and I think subsequently we went out with the Safer Schools officer after that as well.
Second brief area, we know from what you've said that AR's parents seemed very reluctant to override AR's wishes.
Well, we didn't know it was AR's wishes at the time, in terms of he was asleep, and we never got to have the conversation with AR about AR's wishes. It was very much what parents were telling us.
And did you form the impression that the parents wouldn't force him, for example, to see a teacher at the door?
Yes.
Did you form the impression that AR's parents wouldn't force him to go to school?
Yes.
And you say in your statement that the father appeared reluctant to force him to go to school. I'm going to quote from your statement,
Yeah.
due to the knock-on effects at home.
Yes. We had been made aware of a time when AR's father had come in and asked us for some help to be referred into early help, where AR had poured his dad's tea on his head.
Yes. And the reference says PRE 30134.
Thank you.
So there were serious limits to the level of cooperation that you, the school, were getting from AR's parents.
Yes.
And to quote from your statement, your concluded view was that the support the school were getting from Lancashire County Council was, your words, virtually non-existent.
Absolutely, yes.
And so my third area is this. By June of 2024, so that's a month before the attack, AR was off Pressfield's roll. From that point, AR had no connection or association with Pressfield,
No.
but before June 2024, AR was always at risk of a home visit, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
And after that point, there was no risk that anyone from the school would try to visit his home.
No, because he wasn't any longer on our roll.
And did that mean that from that point, June 24, AR was without the school's formal supervision and therefore rather isolated?
I would argue he was isolated before because he still wasn't engaging with ourselves or any other services. So I don't believe that us not visiting him would have made him further isolated.
No. But at that stage, again, from June 24, was the bulk of the responsibility now in the hands of his parents?
It would have been in the hands of his parents previously because we couldn't inflict any change to that situation. But it meant they had one less professional
Yes.
go into the house to knock on the door and not see a child.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Very helpful, Mr. Timken. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, I'm sorry you had to come back, having
That's
originally
okay.
been planned for Friday, and that was very helpful. Thank you very much. You're now free to go.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul, I'm conscious that we are coming up towards the 1.5 hour requirement for the stenographer. Do you want to start the next witness now and then break off?
So I suggest that we break now.
Break now and have a break, actually have a proper break now rather than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'll sit again at just after past.
So our next witness is Kate Dixon, who is the corporate witness on behalf of the Department for Education. The Department for Education is represented this morning by my learned friend, Mr. David Reader.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat, Ms. Dixon. Yes, Mr. Moss.
Thanks, sir. Just start by giving us your full name, if you would, please.
It's Kate Dixon.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. You're quite softly spoken, I can tell, so please keep your voice up, speak loudly into the microphones. Thank you. If we could have on the screen, please, DFE 30256. And Ms Dixon, can you just confirm that this is your statement to the inquiry dated the 5th of September 2025?
Yes, that's correct.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. If we can turn to page 2 of your statement, you explain in paragraph 2 that since 2017, you've had responsibility for national policy on safeguarding in education settings, including countering extremism. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And your role is as Director of Strategy and Safer Streets at the department.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yours is a corporate statement by which I think we can understand that while some of the content of this statement is within your own areas of specialism, I think you've had the assistance of colleagues in certain other areas. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
From correspondence with the inquiry, should we understand that your areas of expertise, as it were, include prevent and radicalisation work within the Department for Education?
Yes.
Mental health and bullying?
I'm not responsible for that at the moment, but I have been previously, yes.
So you're familiar with that?
Yes.
Information technology and risks associated with information technology in relation to inappropriate material?
Yes, that's right.
And risk assessment for pupils and security measures for classes?
Yes, that's right. It's worth mentioning that sort of connected to information technology, I have responsibility for keeping children safe in education, which is probably one of the documents that you might ask me about.
Which we'll come to. Thank you. I think in relation to the other policy areas, would this be right in relation to, in particular, social care outside of those areas of your specialism? That's not an area in which you particularly specialise.
That's correct. I've worked in the department schools area. I have recently transferred into families who do children's social care, so I'm learning about that, and I have read up about it, but that's correct. It's not my direct responsibility.
So turning to paragraph 4 in your statement, still on page 2, please, Sarah, just at the bottom of the page, you set out there that the Department for Education is responsible for setting the framework for the delivery of education and children's services. Can you just give us an overview in very general terms of how it does that and the distinction with operational responsibility?
Yes, certainly. May I, before I go into my evidence, take the opportunity to acknowledge the devastating attack that took place in July 24. I wanted to express the bravery of the families and those involved in trying to learn lessons, and I will do my best to help. In response to your question, the department sets the legislative framework for education and social care. It then produces both statutory and non-statutory guidance. An example of statutory guidance would be keeping children safe in education, and that is something that operationally should or must be followed unless there's a very good reason. It also produces non-statutory guidance, which is best practice or there to support delivery of operational services, but that is not a mandatory piece of guidance. And an example of that is the out-of-school settings guidance. We also set some data collections that we monitor. We set national standards. We work with Ofsted, who inspect, and we also work very closely with stakeholders to both find out what's going on and also improve the guidance that we produce. But we don't do day-to-day operational oversight of individual cases, for example.
So, and I'm not here speaking of AR's own circumstances, but in a case of an individual pupil for whom there are perhaps extreme difficulties, even there, the department wouldn't ordinarily step in and get it involved operationally in the education provision to an individual child?
No, that's correct, we wouldn't.
In terms of maintaining standards and ensuring that the framework of legislation, statutory guidance, non-statutory guidance is followed, you've mentioned Ofsted. Should we understand that the inspection regime to ensure that standards are being met and call it out when it's not being met falls to the relevant inspectorates, and the department doesn't do that directly either?
No, the department doesn't inspect. It will take information from the inspectorate, for example, Ofsted, through annual report, which would highlight perhaps themes that have come up through the inspections. Ministers also meet with Ofsted, as do individual teams. So there is a route back, but we would usually act on themes rather than individual cases, although if there was an individual case, and we're seeing that here, that might well be something that we would change our system, processes, guidance in response to.
So one of the areas I'll ask you questions about in due course is in relation to the transfer of safeguarding information between schools. How would the department become aware if there were vulnerabilities in that or if it wasn't going well?
So we would have a number of routes, I think. We would probably hear from Ofsted, and they would make that clear in their annual report, but also through earlier meetings with officials or ministers. They might ask to do some sort of thematic review. We saw that on peer-on-peer abuse, for example. Ofsted asked if they could do that, and we commissioned that. We might also hear from the National Safeguarding Panel, who do have a similar annual report. They are also looking at serious incidents and local safeguarding reviews, and themes might come up through that. We might also hear from stakeholders, that might be schools or it might be children's social care. We might also, part of my role involves working with the Home Office, the police, across government on Prevent. We might also hear from those sources that there was a job to do something different.
Do groups of head teachers, perhaps at a regional level, have a direct line of communication into the department to raise concerns or not?
They do. So we have a regions group in the department, and we have teams of people who work with the regional directors who oversee a patch of schools, and they have avenues into teams and those directors to feed back information. We are also there. That is a stronger system with schools, but it has some responsibility for children's social care input as well.
Thank you. You've mentioned the Home Office. If we could just look, Ms Dixon, please, at paragraph 12 of your statement, page 5, please, Sarah. I think in relation to the work on the Prevent duty, the Home Office is the lead government department, is that right?
That's right.
But that is an area where presumably you have quite a bit of interface, not least because of the high percentage of referrals that go into Prevent that come from different educational settings.
Yes, that's right. I have a team that work very closely with the Home Office, both on the policy side and the guidance side, but also, if needs be, working with regional Prevent coordinators and with Prevent educational officers in local authorities to help support the delivery of Prevent and feedback to us where changes might need to be made.
I think we've seen somewhere in the documentation that the figure is something in the region of 40% of referrals coming from education. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes, that's right. And it's, I think the Home Office said in their evidence, education is the biggest single referrer into Prevent.
Thank you. I want to move just briefly to the department's involvement, or rather lack of it, with AR and his family specifically. Is this right, that consistent with the evidence that you've just given, Ms Dixon, although the department has searched its systems for any relevant communication, You and those who have helped in the preparation of your statement have not been able to find within the department any specific correspondence, submissions or similar relating to AR beyond the sort of standard information from his schools in the form of ordinary data, which would include AR, but which doesn't specifically name him or draw him to particular attention.
Yes, that's right. So some of our national level data collections will include him, but nothing specific operational, and we wouldn't look down into the individual cases in that national data collection, therefore trend purposes.
So whereas the inquiry has now heard quite a bit of evidence about the challenges in terms of AR initially being at the range and being excluded, and then going to the acorns, starting with good attendance, but that attendance dropping off, and also at the start of the time at the acorns, a period where he wasn't attending at all because of safety concerns, and then transfer to Pressfield, the EHCP, and very poor attendance at Pressfield. What may have been visible to the department in relation to all of that would just be perhaps data on attendance records and perhaps figures of the total number of EHCPs, matters of that kind.
That's right.
Thank you. I want to turn to guidance issued by the department, and you've touched on this already, the difference between statutory and non-statutory guidance. Would it be right that in terms of statutory guidance, wherever in your statement you've referred to statutory guidance, that guidance is really there to ensure that education providers are complying with their legal duties, and that type of statutory guidance can be referred to as evidence of what is expected in the performance of the statutory duties?
Yes, that's right.
Whereas in non-statutory guidance, would this be right, that schools will still be expected to have, be aware of it, still be expected to refer to it, yes?
Yes, that's right.
But not following that guidance wouldn't of itself be evidence that the school was not meeting its statutory obligations?
Yes, so it's often developed as our view on what might be helpful or good practice, but not requirement to follow.
And there might be individual circumstances for individual pupils, or indeed local school level factors that might mean that taking a different approach could be justified.
Yes, that's right. It is worth saying in statutory guidance that is still possible. So it's possible that a different local approach might be taken, but that would need to be with very good reason, and it could be legally challenged. So there's a distinction there.
When Ofsted assesses education providers, and indeed when it's looking at, for children, the provision of social care and family support, does it only look to the compliance with statutory guidance, or does it take non-statutory guidance into account as well?
It will take non-statutory guidance into account because that is good practice.
Thank you. Could we look, please, together at page 15 of your statement and paragraph 53? We see, not least from the helpfully detailed content of your statement, but from the witnesses who've given evidence so far, that there's a lot of guidance, and some of it I think you would concede changes fairly frequently.
Yes, I mean, for example, keeping children safe in education, which I have responsibility for, we look at annually. We tend to try and do a technical update one year and a more substantive one the following year, and flag differences between the two pieces of guidance. But yes, that's one of many pieces of guidance the department produces.
And I'm not going to go through it all because you've set it out clearly in your statement. Does paragraph 53, however, summarise the different ways in which the department seeks to ensure that the guidance is brought to the attention of education providers.
Yes, that's right.
You also indicate, I think, that some schools rely on third-party services. It's over the page at paragraph 54. So presumably some of those are maybe paid services to help bring the information together for schools. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I suspect more schools are relying on AI as well now.
Thank you. I think you make clear in paragraph 58 of your statement, lower down on page 16, that your view is that the guidance across the areas was appropriate and adequate and was sufficiently visible. Does the department get adverse feedback about the sheer volume of guidance or the changes in guidance?
Yes and no. So again, I'll use the example of keeping children safe in education because it's one I know. That's quite a lengthy piece of guidance. There is a requirement in it that part 1 is read by everybody. We get 2 bits of feedback about that guidance. From some people that it is too long and they would like it to be shortened, and from others that they use it as a reference book. So they would like actually more in it, and that can often depend on the role that individuals are, for example, in a school playing. So some people who are dealing with safeguarding all day, every day, would like more support from it. A governor or a head teacher might prefer it to be shorter. So we tend to ask for feedback in the way that we consult on our guidance for those sorts of questions and then try and make the best judgment.
Fine, thank you. I want to turn next, please, to the question of exclusions, and I can take this, I think, in relatively short order. The inquiry knows that AR was permanently excluded from the Range School after he admitted carrying a knife into school on a number of occasions and said that he was willing to use the knife. I think as a department, you wouldn't have access to the full detail of that information. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
But from the evidence of which the department is aware from disclosure in the inquiry, does it appear that the school followed the statutory duties and the appropriate process for the exclusion?
Yes, it does.
So questions about the transfer of information and how the risk was responded to is perhaps a different matter. But in terms of the public law decision or the educational decision to exclude AR, you're not aware of any concerns that that wasn't taken appropriately in terms of process and procedure?
No.
Can I turn then to a more detailed topic, which is that of AR's attendance? If we look first of all at paragraph 67 of your statement on page 20, the starting point is this, right, is to recognise that it is parents who have a duty, first of all, under Section 7 of the 1996 Act to ensure that their child of compulsory school age, that's to say between 5 and 16, receives an efficient full-time education, either by attendance at school or otherwise. Yes?
Yes, that's right.
And as you go on to explain in your statement, local authorities can issue now penalty notices where parents have registered their child at school, but the child fails to ensure that they attend regularly. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
In order to ensure compliance with this, and no doubt to maintain standards, schools are legally required to maintain accurate admission and attendance registers, to follow up on absences, and to notify local authorities of irregular attendance. Yes?
Yes, that's right. We're also, at the moment, legislating for a children not in school register. So for children who aren't the otherwise here, who aren't in school, at the moment, that is an area that we don't have registers for, but our bill going through at the moment will hopefully make that the case.
Thank you. I don't think it's necessary to go to the detailed provisions of the guidance, but in part for the Learned Chair's note, I think in 2019, the relevant guidance was School Attendance Guidance 2019, is that right?
Yes.
So that's DFE 4096. And then as you've referred to in your statement, in 2022, there was working together to improve school attendance. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's DFE 4097. We look at paragraph 80 of your statement, page 24. Have the whole of paragraph 80, please, Sarah. I think you accept that the latter guidance, the 2022 guidance, was clearer on the expectations around severe absence. Is that right?
Yes, between 2019 and 2022, I think our guidance changed quite a lot. We learned a lot on the basis of COVID and then the return to education after COVID. And we have done a lot of work on attendance, and the guidance is quite a lot improved, I think, from some of the things we've learnt. I think quite a lot of that is relevant, although not... it's relevant to the inquiry, but it was largely done because of COVID.
Yeah. It introduced this concept of severe absence. Can you help us with what that is and how it's defined?
Yeah, there are two things. There's persistent absence and there is severe absence. Persistent absence is missing 10% of education sessions. In education, there's a session in the morning and a session in the afternoon, and attendance is recorded at each of those points for each pupil. Persistent absence is missing 10% in a year. Severe absence is worse than that, and that is missing more than 50% of the sessions.
Thank you. And then bringing matters more up to date, I think further guidance then replaced it in 2024, so for your note DFE 30103, is that right?
That's right, and that guidance prior to 24, the guidance was non-statutory, and from 24 it became statutory.
Following. Now, we've heard evidence from Mr. Turner from the local authority about the potential confusion caused by the fact that AR resided in Lancashire but went to schools in Sefton, in the Sefton Council area, so the Range and Pressfield were both within Sefton Council's area. On whom does the legal duty sit in those circumstances in terms of local authorities and schools?
The legal duty for providing a suitable education rests with the local authority in which the individual lives.
So that was Lancashire?
That's right, that was Lancashire.
How does that work in practice, though, if the school that is maintaining registers and details of attendance is in a different county council's area?
So the school will follow its process of collecting the attendance data in the school, in Sefton. But for issues and concerns, then the information should be shared between local authorities, both at a trend level and at individual level where there is a threshold for that concern. I think the local authority, I think Paul acknowledged in his statement that things hadn't always gone the way that they should have done, and this is part of the issue, I think, that was highlighted.
Is that a general problem, that the cross-border attendance creates confusion, and sometimes individual cases aren't followed up as firmly as they should be?
I think the guidance is clear about where the duties rest. The guidance refers to relevant local authorities. It's definitely something that I picked up in my reading for the inquiry, whether there's a case to be clearer there, but I think the guidance does make clear where the different responsibilities lie. I think the evidence you've heard doesn't, it hasn't always worked as well as it should have done, and I do note that the local authority acknowledged that.
My question was really against the background that, as you correctly identified, there has been evidence to this inquiry in AR's case that didn't work well. Is that something that the department is aware of generally? Not so much that the guidance isn't cleared, but at a local operational level, that's creating issues?
I don't have experience that has been flagged to me. I suspect it is always more complicated where two local authorities are involved, but it hasn't been flagged to me that that's a systemic issue.
Thank you. If we look at paragraph 81 of your statement, it starts on 24, but Sarah, could we pick it up at page 25, please? The top half of the page could be highlighted. About 4 lines down, you make clear there that under Section 19 of the 1996 Act, local authorities have a statutory duty to arrange suitable full-time education for children of compulsory school age who, for any reason, may not otherwise receive it. Yes?
Yes.
Now, the context, perhaps we'll come back to in relation to this, the context in which you were introducing that was the bail conditions, which appeared to prevent AR going to Acorn School until a satisfactory arrangement had been made, essentially. Would this be right, that brief interruptions would not necessarily trigger the local authority's duty under Section 19? So if there was a problem of short duration with a pupil attending school, that wouldn't necessarily mean that local authorities would be expected to step in to exercise their duty under Section 19?
Yes.
But if at any point the local authority determines that the provision is no longer suitable for the child, then they should be taking prompt action to identify and secure alternative settings. Would you agree?
Yes.
We've heard evidence that AR's attendance at the Acorns, once he was able to attend, was reasonably good, but then worsened the longer he was on their roll, including after the COVID lockdowns. If we look at paragraph 79 of your statement on the previous page, that could just be enlarged, please, Sarah. You noted that quite a large percentage at times of AR's attendance was marked as other authorised absence. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And we've heard that related to times when AR was attending in a pattern or very part-time timetables. So sometimes that might be as little as an hour a day. Why were you flagging that up as a particular issue in paragraph 79 of your statement?
So I was flagging this up because I wanted to make the point that actually the part-time timetable and the way that it was coded actually could have masked the difference between attendance and not attendance because of the way it was coded in a bucket. So what I was seeking to say there was actually the attendance changes we've made to the attendance guidance now would make it more obvious if AR or another individual was attending against a part-time timetable, whereas the way that it was coded before didn't make a distinction between whether AR turned up for the part-time timetable or didn't turn up for the part-time timetable. The concern is not me directing that at the school. That is the concern that the way the coding was set up in our guidance allowed the masking of that attendance against a part-time timetable, which the improvements we've made since would make it more obvious.
Thank you. So this wasn't a criticism of how Acorns were choosing to permit a restricted hours timetable, so much as the way that that was being recorded on the systems at the time may have masked the fact that there was actually very poor attendance, because it would look like it was authorised.
Yes, that's right. It appears to me from the evidence that I've read and listened to that Acorns did a very good job at trying to tailor their offer to AR, and that actually his attendance was against the part-time time was probably better than actually the data and interpretation of the data might have suggested.
Thank you. You say that such a high rate of absence should have been seen as a risk factor and reported to the local authority via a statutory attendance return. We've heard evidence that because of the other issues that were in play, the local authority were in fact aware and on notice that this was happening. What would you have expected the local authority to do at a time when AR's attendance was limited to a very restricted timetable, but there was a reasonable level of compliance with that very restricted timetable?
I would expect the local authority to be aware of the reasons behind that to satisfy themselves both against their duty of education and their duty of safeguarding.
And once it then fell into AR having simply very bad attendance full stop, what would you then have expected to happen?
I think, again, both of those duties come into play. So seeking to understand how AR could be supported with education, which I think from the evidence I've seen, there were lots of efforts, particularly from the school, to engage him in education, but it would also be a risk factor and a flag against his life, not just his education. I think our view from the department is education is good in itself in terms of what you learn, but it is also a protective factor against risk, and the absence from education would flag that risk.
Before we go on to explore some of that a little bit longer, before we lose track of the bail conditions point, I think you tell us in your statement that generally speaking, the department would prefer that bail conditions shouldn't be set so as to prevent a child from attending their school. It's paragraph 81, sir, for your note.
Thank you.
But you caveat that unless it's absolutely unavoidable. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And I understand that there's been some change. It is used, bail conditions are moving away from preventing attendance at education institutions. I think that's right.
Do you know how that's been communicated? Because that must be an issue for the local court service and also the CPS. Do you know how that's been communicated?
Communicated to education or to?
No, to the CPS and to the courts that placing a bail condition that a child shouldn't attend their own school is in most cases to be avoided.
I don't know how that's been communicated.
Is that something that you could check and update the inquiry on?
Certainly.
Thank you. The evidence that we heard from Ms. Hodson was that really from the start it was considered that Acorns as a referral unit should only be a short-term solution. And there were problems initially with permitting any attendance because of matters in relation to a risk assessment. But that thereafter there was really quite a lengthy period where AR remained enrolled at Acorns with decreasingly good attendance in circumstances where the EHCP had been concluded in a way that was suggesting that he should have mainstream schooling. Are you aware of that in general terms?
Yes.
We've heard evidence that the reason why mainstream schooling was set in the EHCP was that that was AR's parents' own strong preference, whereas Ms. Hodson's evidence and her expressed view at the time was that it was unsustainable and not suitable to think that AR could go to mainstream schooling given the two incidents that had happened, so that the bringing to knives 10 times leading to the permanent exclusion, and then the hockey stick attack and the charge of the criminal offence when he also had a knife. Can you help in relation to that from the departmental overview policy position as to how that position should have been resolved?
So parents can express a preference in an EHCP, but it's not only down to their parental choice. So the process rests with the local authority, and they can make a different decision, which I think they did, although after some delay.
We know, so the reference is the SEND Code of Practice, DFE 3042, that there's a statutory presumption in favour of mainstream schooling and a statutory presumption in favour of parents' choice. But also, as you've mentioned, the local authorities can refuse that choice where it's deemed to be unsuitable. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
From the way in which you've familiarised yourself with the materials in this case, you've touched upon it, but would the department's view be that there was a delay by the local authority before that was applied in this case?
Yes.
And in fact, I think it's fair to say that in due course, what changed was eventually parents accepting that mainstream schooling was not going to be possible rather than a formal override by the local authority. Is that your understanding too?
Yes, that's right.
Again, one thing that I want to ask in relation to that is whether that is a more general, widespread problem as opposed to an operational decision or an operational shortcoming in AR's case. Can you help us with that?
Yes, my department is looking quite substantively at the process of EHCPs and special educational needs provision. It's not my area of responsibility, and it is being kept on a close list, so I don't know all of the detail about that, but I do know that the direction of travel is that a greater assumption that mainstream settings can do more for the growing demand for EHCPs, and the presumption that mainstream education could and should be able to do better, and that the rising parental choice around EHCPs is probably an unsustainable direction of travel.
That's the context of the EHCPs going up in number,
Yeah.
which is something which there's a good deal of publicity and understanding about. The need for EHCPs to be focused on the child and the interests of the child and giving a strong voice to parents is no doubt important, and in many cases it may be right that they're given priority. But is not one of the lessons from this case that there may need to be a different approach where the child presents a significant risk to others?
Yes, I think many witnesses and statements have acknowledged that one of the difficulties here is the difference between the system that looks after the individual as an individual and the children's social care having the risk-based approach to the individual and looking out for their risks versus the risks that that individual could pose on others. So yes, I do think that is a distinction.
Because would you agree that a critical analysis of what's happened in AR's case may be that because of an unrealistic parental preference, AR spent over a year at Acorns with very low attendance, remaining on the roll of that referral unit when efforts should have been being made to find more suitable alternative provision?
Yes, however, Acorns did a really impressive job, I think, in terms of trying to tailor their offer to AR. They tried a number of different things and engaged him. So I'd like to acknowledge the work they did.
Understood, but not perhaps with respect to an answer to my question. He ended up spending over a year, an additional year, at a referral unit when efforts should have been being made to find suitable alternative provision. And for that period, it looks like no attempts were made to find suitable alternative provision.
Yes, I think there was a long delay in getting the right information on the HCP and working with the parents and looking at alternatives, yes.
And the same critical analysis might point towards the fact that during that same time as the EHCP was being formulated, there was a parent-led process by which information about the risk to others was being watered down in the EHCP. Are you aware of the evidence to that effect?
Yes, I may not be aware of every backwards and forwards, but yes, in general.
And appreciating that the inquiry is fast-moving and issues are coming up, do you know if anything has so far been done in terms of considering the need to ensure that information about risk to others is not inappropriately edited out of EHCPs?
I don't know. I guess I would like to say that, and we'll come on to information sharing, I think, possibly later, but to rely on an EHCP for that to be the place where the risk is put down would be the wrong thing to do. There are other parts of the process and system where that risk should be written down and transferred, and those are the appropriate places.
If that is going to be done, and it's not going to be, my words, housed in the EHCP, it becomes all the more imperative that a form of accurate, readily identified and appropriately shared risk assessment is conveyed alongside the EHCP. Would you agree?
Yes, yes, via the information sharing process. Yeah.
And is there clarity about those divisions? If you're saying, well, the EHCP perhaps doesn't need to go into a question of risk to others because that's not the best place for it, is there a clarity in policy about where that risk assessment information should be and how it's transferred between education providers?
I think it is in keeping children safe in education. So I think where there is risk that should be known to a new school, then there's a detailed paragraph about how that information should be shared and when.
Because one of the concerns may be that one might get the impression from the evidence, at least to this inquiry, that the HCP is, in a sense, is the lead document and is sort of leading and dictating considerations of which education provider would be most suitable. But the stark information this morning, for example, you may have heard from Ms. McLaughlin, who became the head at Pressfield, was that they simply wouldn't have taken AR had they known the risk to others information in circumstances where information had been edited out of the EHCP. Coming back to how information should be shared, I mean, the EHCP serves a purpose. I think as I understand from reading the evidence about safeguarding and risk transfer, that process didn't work between Acorns and Pressfield in the way that it should have done, and that is where that safeguarding information should have been transferred. Right, we'll come back to that perhaps in information sharing as you rightly predict. Looking at the Pressfield school period, we've heard incredibly poor attendance there of 0.7%. And the difficulty that school has described is a difficulty of getting any assistance from the local authority, let's say Lancashire County Council or any other agency, save to some extent from Merseyside Police in carrying out welfare checks. What would be the expectation there in terms of agencies who should be helping a school with welfare checks?
Yes, I think both those agencies should be helping. That would be the expectation.
In terms of local authorities, is there a funding resource problem in reality with them doing that?
I think we heard evidence from the local authority that they felt that there was a capacity issue as well as acknowledging the failures. We do hear that they are very stretched at the moment, yes.
Yeah. And is that just this local authority or others?
We hear in general local authorities are stretched in terms of their resourcing.
It doesn't perhaps make much sense to say, well, in general terms, we would expect the local authorities to help if they're not funded and resourced to do it.
I think probably it's not for me to comment, but yes, I have heard that too.
So that to some extent is a systemic problem linked to the difficulties of funding of local authorities.
Correct.
Thank you. What about in relation to police assistance? We've heard that effectively one force was able to offer some assistance where the other wasn't, and some of that related to the police view in Lancashire that it didn't fall to them because it wasn't a welfare concern effectively of high enough concern of a risk to life or very serious harm, and therefore they weren't the right agency. Again, is that a problem that you're familiar with?
Well, again, the police have very difficult jobs and a lot resting on them. They need to make the judgments on individual cases. I think we would expect them to make welfare judgments. They made a judgment in this case, and it would have been good to have had their support for welfare checks.
particularly in relation to school pupils where there are concerns about risk to others, it might be thought that it's not an ideal situation whereby the capacity of agencies beyond the individual school it is constrained by resource and funding for amongst different agencies, so both the local authority and the police, and there could be such clear regional variations in that. Is there any work in hand at departmental level to look at that, to bring greater clarity about who should provide assistance to schools in welfare checks when there are higher risk cases?
I don't know in specific answer to that question. What I do know is that I've been involved in a piece of work which has involved different agencies across government and including the police and social care on looking at prevent and our better evolving understanding of violence fixation. So I do think that we do need to get better to understand what we're asking different local agencies to look for in terms of helping them with that risk, which I think is relevant in this case.
The number of cases that may be within the prevent sphere, they would potentially is very small indeed. Is this not risking being a wider problem?
I guess what I'm saying is the piece of work and thinking that we're doing at the moment is exactly about that wider problem. So prevent is a very defined system, but what we are understanding more about is the risks of those that have an interest or fixation with violence that fall outside of the prevent thresholds, and the questions that we're asking ourselves and trying to work on a solution is how do you extend a system where in the local systems that exist should that be picked up, and what do we mean? What is violence fixation? What is what's the behaviour that's being displayed? And I think we don't yet have an answer, but that is a very pertinent and difficult question.
Could I possibly ask you to include that in an update, any update that is available by the end of November?
Yes, I think it might be a question to a number of us,
yes.
Not just me.
A corporate response.
As in across different government departments.
Yes,
yeah, fine.
and if you can do any necessary liaison and provide a response, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Some 2 years, I think, AR at Pressfield, with that attendance level very poor. He would only have been within compulsory school age for the first few months. And so thereafter, ordinarily, from a school attendance point of view, it wouldn't be an issue. But of course, on an EHCP, the position was different. Would you agree?
Yes, EHCP's got to 25.
Yeah. And so what, from an overview departmental policy point of view, what should have been happening in that 2-year period when Pressfield were doing what they could in terms of welfare visits and had done what they could, as we heard this morning, in terms of early attempts to introduce AR to the school, but he simply wasn't attending. What more should have been happening in that really quite lengthy period?
It's not my area of expertise, but I think conversations with the parents, conversations with AR, which I know were tried to happen, and the local authority to pick up its duty.
Yeah. And would it be right that ultimately the duty in terms of providing a suitable education provision to meet what was required in the HCP fell to the local authority?
Yes.
And that attendance of 0.7% made it abundantly clear that the arrangement at Pressfield was, by a very long way, not working.
Yes.
We know that the County Council had improvement notices in May 2016 and more recently in June 2025. Is that right?
Yes.
In this area. If matters are not improving, what is the department able to do?
So the Secretary of State is able to write an intervention, I think it's called an intervention notice, often comes from a senior civil servant suggesting areas of action. She is also able to send in different management support as part of her duty.
Given that Lancashire County Council had improvement notices in 2016, but has had another one as recently of June of this year, do you know what the current position is in relation to monitoring the necessary improvements?
I don't only understand the system of having an action plan and monitoring, which I presume follows very quickly after the inspection, but then the monitoring, it would be logical to have some time before improvements might be seen.
Thank you. There is a section of your statement, perhaps we can just pick it up at page 34. Starting at paragraph 121 at the bottom of the page. It notes, and I'm going to take this relatively shortly, but that the SEND Code of Practice hasn't been updated since 2015. Does have material, as you candidly acknowledge, that's out of date. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And then, as we see in paragraph 133, at page 37, the alternative provision guidance has been updated in 2025 to give more evidence to best practice, but the updated document gives greater focus on early intervention addressing children's needs in mainstream school. But I think that there have been no major changes in the legislation in this area since, is it 2016?
That's correct, there haven't been changes.
And you say, you don't perhaps need to flick, I'm taking this from several different passages in your statement, but you say in paragraph 117 that there's widespread consensus that reform is needed in the SEND system to strengthen the support that children and young people receive and to make the system more financially sustainable, yes?
Yes, I said a little bit about it earlier.
And the big driver behind that, is that the same point that there's such a rapid increase in the number of EHCPs and not the resources to deal with it?
Partly that. I think there is also a view that actually children staying in mainstream settings is better for them as individuals where that is possible, and that there's work to do with the mainstream school system to support them to be able to be flexible and respond to our growing understanding of special educational needs, whether they meet the EHC threshold or not.
Paragraph 126, the top of page 36, please. Speaking of the need for reform in this area, you indicate there that the department will be setting out proposals for significant reform of the SEND and AP system in a white paper in the autumn of 2025. I think bringing matters up to date, there was an announcement, is this right, last Wednesday, that was now being delayed until the new year. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And I think that announcement also made it clear that we wanted to work with families more closely on those
Is that the reason to have more consultation time with families?
Yes, that's correct.
And would it be right, therefore, that there's no prospect of an update in that area by the end of November, because it's really going to start taking shape in the new year?
Correct.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to a different topic now, which is information technology. If we could look at paragraph 310, please, of your statement. It's at page 80, Sarah. I think this is back into areas which may be more directly, immediately familiar to you.
Thank you.
But since 2016, you set out there that the guidance keeping children safe in education, I think you're responsible for that, the annual publication, is that right?
That's right, yes.
But since 2016, it's had provision about ensuring appropriate filtering and monitoring systems are in place for online in schools. And it's regularly reviewed to limit exposure to harmful content, yes?
Yes.
You set out in paragraph 311 that that's been strengthened since, including in the 2020 publication. And in 2023, also in paragraph 311, I think for the first time, statutory guidance has been introduced in this to strengthen it yet further. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Some of the evidence in relation to this, in relation to the Acorns school, we have the internet browser history for the 15th of November and 2020, and just forgive me, 2019. And the indications in relation to that are that in relation to the American school shooting, that was on a mainstream news site, so the Daily Mail. But he was also searching for, repeatedly, images of degloving injuries. And so far as I think the inquiry's been able to take it from the internet browser history download, there seemed to be some occasions when searching for degloving injuries was blocked, but others when it tended to get through. Ms. Hodson's evidence about that, I think it would be fair to say that she was surprised on viewing the browser history that some of it got through, but she explained that they were a small school, that they didn't have their own IT department as such, and were reliant upon the software which they had used at the school. Do you recognise that problem?
Yes, and I think it will. Filtering will never be perfect, which is why our guidance speaks to both filtering and monitoring. So filtering is using a system to block out content, but monitoring is looking at what is and isn't blocked out to see if it is doing the job appropriately. So both of those things are necessary, both with the infallibility of a system, but also with the fact that the online world operates at such pace. And I think also with AR's search terms, he was looking for different ways to get access to the material. So he was looking sometimes either for mainstream sites or for those that were connected with medical to get access. So both of those things are massively important. You can't do one without the other.
So with the work that you do in this area, and having looked, it sounds as though you've looked at the browser history. Have you looked at the...
I haven't looked at it all, but no, I understand some of what was there and what wasn't.
Is there any sense in which the department or somebody on the department's behalf is able to be more proactive in that area in terms of giving guidance on the best products or quality assuring the software? Because obviously, month by month, there are new challenges in terms of online material.
So quite purposefully, we don't make that our role to QA systems. As we explained right at the beginning, the department's role is in setting out what is expected rather than exactly how to deliver it. However, we through our stakeholder groups and through contact with people who are designing these systems, we have some good relations with people in the sector. So the UK Internet Safer Centre for Internet Use, we could certainly flag some of these evolving challenges so that the software designers can respond and better build their systems. We are, as a government department, we also talk to those responsible for the Online Safety Act. I think you're calling a witness from in that area. So as we understand the evolving harm to children and young people, we have got avenues to influence, if not directly the way that you're suggesting.
Can I probe that in this way? The general arrangement whereby the department sets standards but gives a good deal of autonomy to local schools is perhaps both understandable and beyond the terms of reference of this inquiry. But on something as important as online safety, isn't there a case for having the best possible system available on a nationwide level with the very best standards and the best brains applied to it that is then made available for all schools? Why is that something which is suitable for individual autonomy if there is a risk that some systems may not be as good as others?
I think my response would be that we wouldn't be agile enough, we wouldn't be fast enough to be responding to every new threat and knowledgeable enough. So actually setting out the scope of what we do know, and it a bit links to the piece of work that you've asked for an update on violence fixation, the best way we could influence the system and help the experts build the right filtering systems would be to share what we understand to be the risk factors in such a way that they could use their expertise to build those systems.
I'm not suggesting that IT experts within the department should themselves design this and try to keep on top of it. But isn't there a case for identifying the best possible IT provider to do this and then have that at a nationwide level so that individual schools are not susceptible to variations in standards? And then it would be easier, would it not, to monitor the effectiveness of the control mechanisms in schools across the whole country?
I understand your point. I just don't think that's the way that our system would operate.
Because
we give autonomy to individual schools.
Even if it's not in the individual area a good idea?
Our system is set up to give autonomy to individual schools.
Thank you. Turning to prevent, your statement, if we can look at page 61, please, paragraph 244. You set out some of the basics as a helpful recap. Look at perhaps just at the very bottom of paragraph 60, first of all. You deal with what the prevent duty is, and then the top of page 61, 244, education settings that are subject to the prevent duty should understand the requirements of the duty as part of their wider safeguarding and welfare responsibilities. This is particularly important given that education accounts for approximately 40%. And again, I think you've given that figure that we've seen elsewhere.
Yeah.
You set out at 246 that in addition to the Home Office materials in relation to this, the Department for Education publishes its own non-statutory guidance on the prevent duty. Is that right?
Yes.
You have a system of regional prevent coordinators, which you've dealt with at 254. Just help us with their role in summary.
Yes, so they have quite a varied role. They can support in terms of the preventative and education. They are also able to feed back to us knowledge of what's happening in local area and what's being asked for by partners on the ground. They also have a response function, so the events of this inquiry and then the riots afterwards, they had a role in supporting the local area. Again, when different things happen across the country, they have that sort of a role. There are, I think 8 of them, so they cover quite broad areas. So.
Thank you. Would their role extend to supporting an individual school if that school thought that its voice wasn't being listened to in an individual case?
Unlikely, but possible.
Unlikely because?
Unlikely because they cover a large area and that is not what they're set up to do. Possible because if it linked back to a particular incident that had happened, that is a role that those coordinators can play. If something was highlighted, significantly up to the department as a problem, then we might use them to go and find out a bit more about it or intervene. But aligned to what I said about sort of local autonomy, that would not be our normal operating model.
If we look at paragraph 256, page 64, please, Sarah. You explained that regional coordinator network has developed a universal training offer launched in September 24, so we know post-attack. You say it's designed to help build a minimum level of capability and prevent implementation across education settings in England. What does that mean in plain English?
I talked about how we've been working with the Home Office and they set out a number of their different changes. Our role is to help education institutions understand the different thresholds and what they mean. So our coordinator network and the work that we do in this area is to support education to deliver against the changes that happen from Prevent. We do that through this. We do that in various other ways. We've got a website called Educate Against Hate. We publish blogs and different resources. We're always seeking to try and respond to changing incidents and requests from the sector where we can.
And prior to September 24, what would the source of Prevent training have been? Would that be that one person within a school typically would train themselves in it with online materials and then inform others, or how did it work?
Local authorities have in the past had, and some still do, have Prevent education officers. They are some of them are funded by the Home Office, in particular hotspot areas. They have often delivered the training to education settings. There is a requirement for all staff in a school to understand Prevent. That might be through a local Prevent education officer coming into a school and delivering a presentation. We have tried to align Prevent responsibilities with keeping children safe in education responsibilities, because the education sector understands that safeguarding document very well, keeping children safe in education, and because Prevent is an important but rarer occurrence in a school, but often the source is local authority prevent education officers.
Ms Lewis, the safeguarding lead for Acorn said that she thought that refresher training in prevent should be made mandatory in education, at least for safeguarding leads. Is anything happening in that sphere?
No, and I did see that. So again, our guidance, both on prevent and on keeping children safe, puts the expectations and duties out to schools. It doesn't say exactly how they should be delivered. Keeping children safe does say that our recommendation is it's refreshed annually, and often schools use the first inset day in September to focus on keeping children safe in education. I would probably suggest that if the consensus is that a greater focus on prevent in all schools would be important, that probably that came through the link with keeping children safe in education, which and therefore we look at whether actually there's a bit of strengthening of the cross-reference between the documents to put the emphasis in keeping children safe in education rather than on mandating prevent refresher training every year.
Right. When it comes to individual referrals, as you state in paragraph 267 of your statement at page 67, once a referral has been made, the referrer in the prevent system doesn't play a role in the decision-making process, though they may be approached for additional information. Yes?
Yes.
One of the points that emerges out of the prevent-related evidence in this inquiry is the sense from the Acorn School in particular that there was, in their view, as Miss Hodson put it, a lack of triangulation. And I think by that she meant that there wasn't a process whereby counter-terrorism police really verified its assessment or its thinking in any way with the school. And two of the ways in which that may have been of benefit were as follows. First of all, there was a sense that the school had worked very closely with AR, and Miss Allred in particular was a designated resource. And knowing AR as she had got to do, she did have very significant concerns about the extent to which he may be open to radicalization, even though her view was that he wasn't active at the time. The second sense in which it may have been beneficial was that there was information that was known to schools and to Acorns that may have put a different light on Prevent's assessment. There would be a number of factors to that, but one was the whole account that AR was saying that he had been bullied was viewed with, to say the least, a very large degree of skepticism by Acorn School, whose evidence, I hope I summarise it fairly, was that they had a very large degree of oversight of all of their pupils, but particularly someone like AR, who was on restricted timetable with restricted access to the wider classroom, and indeed had directly witnessed some of the events about which AR complained and his father complained, and that they were completely being exaggerated and were not objectively accurate. And the second was a sense in which AR's family were themselves minimizing and diminishing some of the seriousness of what was going on. Against that background, can you help as to any resolution of that tension, whereby, as you say accurately in terms of the process, the referrer, even if it's a professional like a school, doesn't play any role in the decision making. But on one view of the facts here, that may have made a real difference if Prevent had got closer to the school's thinking.
I did hear the evidence. I think on the one hand, the Prevent system and how decisions are taken is the responsibility of the Home Office. On the other hand, from listening to the evidence, and obviously it's a little bit mixed up with the fact that none of the Prevent referrals were accepted, I think. But I can see that a better dialogue between the school and the police making decisions about those Prevent thresholds would have been helpful. And I think the general conclusion is that they would have been taken through to channel and should have been. I can also see from Acorn's point of view that they would have found it helpful to understand why the referral wasn't getting through, and to have been able to add to that. I mean, as I understand it, the process of being able to put in the information is available to the school, but I can also see on a kind of human level as well, when you don't get any feedback, you don't quite know whether you're doing right or wrong. So that is a useful point to reflect. And again, as we do that thinking piece about the wider piece of work, about what doesn't fall into Prevent, what falls just outside or significantly outside, that greater dialogue about what that risk is and how people have come to that conclusion and what should be done instead would be a helpful process.
If we look at the top of your page 68, please, Ms Dixon. This is part of your paragraph 268. You say about 6 lines down that the department recognises that when cases are not adopted into Prevent, there's been inconsistency in the onward signposting either back to the referrer or on to additional local services. And the department has raised this concern with partners previously. So we're looking at what may be thought to be an acute example, but this is not, to you, a new problem. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's right. And we talked about our regional network, being able to feed that intelligence back as we work with the Home Office, yes.
Is there any prospect of, again, things are complicated because the Prevent process is already quite a complicated one, but is there any prospect of any formal change in the interface between schools and Prevent to give schools a greater voice, not decision-making powers, but to seek to ensure that they have a greater voice, and that if decisions are taken not to take them on, that they are treated to a greater extent as professionals to whom feedback should be given, and potentially that feedback might in some cases lead to a review as to whether the original decision was correct.
Yes, and again, using the local authority Prevent education officer as a conduit if actually the volume is not possible at the individual school to CT police, to be able to collect those themes and feed that back.
What about nationwide in terms of Home Office, Prevent to DFE? Is this not something that requires national consideration rather than being left to the discretion of the regional coordinators?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to give you an example of how it would operate on a more local level. Absolutely, yes. We're often in meetings discussing these sorts of things, and as I've talked about, the wider cohort of what doesn't fall into Prevent and working out what those thresholds should be and what the feedback loops should be and what we're looking for in order to be able to give better guidance locally as to what we mean by these different risks, so that a more automatic process can be taken forward. So yes.
So discussions about that, but is anything actually going to eventuate from it? Is anything in the pipeline, do you know?
Well, it is very wrapped up in the work that we're doing on violence fixated individuals because it's a spectrum of the problem. So I will give you the best answer that I can by the end of November. Is that when you asked for it?
Please.
I doubt it will be the final answer, but I will give you the best answer that we've got so far about what we're thinking about and where it's going.
Thank you. So there's further information about this at paragraph 459 and 460, just for your note.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That takes us then to the information transfer between schools, including in relation to risk assessment. And again, if I can just try to summarise it, I'm sure you're broadly familiar with it. In relation to the transfer of information between the Range School and Acorns, there was a short delay, it seems, in the safeguarding information, which at the Range was kept on a housekeeper's log rather than on CPOMs at the time. But there was a short delay in that material being provided. As soon as Acorns specifically requested the information, the Range School provided it. The evidence from Mr. Turner of the local authority was that he would expect that to have been done school to school. The evidence from Mr. Kugin from the Range School was that he would agree normally, but this was a case where AR had been permanently excluded and they didn't actually know to which school or referral unit AR would be sent. And he believes that the information was provided to the local authority with the expectation that they would send it on. So that's the first example of a problem arising. Before I ask you anything about that, in terms of Acorns to Pressfield, you would have gathered we heard some evidence about that last week, in particular from Ms. Smith, and more this morning from Ms. McLaughlin. And it seems that the system was open to individual failure in the sense that the information was transferred by egress email, but there was a failure by the DSL, which she admits, she was away at the time, to obtain that information upon her return. And as we've heard, the latter failure of communication was particularly significant because had all of the information been known, Pressfield, in fact, wouldn't have taken AR on at all because of his risk profile not meeting. Now, what is the general position of the department, first of all, in terms of the expectations of how safeguarding information should be referred from school to school?
So Keeping Children Safe in Education talks about the transfer of information as soon as possible, certainly within 5 days. But it also has a statement in there that says if it's relevant to pass it on in advance, then consideration should be given to that. I think all of the words are there. That if they've been followed, then it would have worked. I understand all of the. I've seen and heard the evidence of why it didn't. This was, when I was doing my preparation, was one area where I did wonder whether we could be a bit more descriptive about examples of when actually in advance might be appropriate, or maybe make more of the emphasis on as soon as possible rather than people assume the backstop of 5 days is okay. We are running a consultation for the changes to Keeping Children Safe in Education for 2026. So that was one thing that I thought we could take away and look at. In addition, although I think that's the most relevant bit, the common transfer file is 15 days. I think the other bit that I would reflect on is it was, in terms of the two things. It probably is right that the local authority is the backstop. So if you don't know where a child is going, then that seems an acceptable place to send the information. And then the last thing I wanted to say was there's been an acceptance that the email went to the DSL and they were on sick and didn't pick it up. But there needs to be a designated safeguarding lead available at all times. So I think one of the learnings was that actually going to an individual's email rather than a group email for safeguarding was also a useful extra change that would have made the process less likely to fail.
So would you agree with this, that first of all, there is a need to ensure that where the safeguarding information relates to the pupil presenting any kind of significant risk to other pupils, that should be a mandatory earlier sharing of information?
Yes, I think my reading of the paragraph in Keeping Children Safe in Education does say that. So there should be consideration of advanced sharing where that risk is necessary to protect the people in the school. But I do think we could make it clearer, having, listened to what happened, and I don't know if it would make any difference, but we could make it clearer.
And secondly, guidance to ensure that schools understand that there shouldn't be single points of failure, such as a single email. Who is the recipient? Would you agree?
Yes.
And thirdly, should consideration be given, linked to the second point, to some sort of fail-safe mechanism whereby there has to be a standard check done at some fixed time that the safeguarding information has been seen, that's confirmed to the senior leadership of the school, without which the placement shouldn't be continuing?
That's certainly one way of doing it. The other bit in Keeping Children Safe is that it does say acknowledge that receipt, and again, I think that is open to interpretation. What does that mean? Does that mean you got an email?
Yeah.
We know it got sent. We don't know if it was opened. Was it received by the right person? Did it get to the right place? So your idea is a good way of doing it. Without having talked to a number of different people about how you might operationalise it, there might be a similar but better way of doing it. But yes, the point about knowing that the information has got to where it needs to get to and has been seen by an appropriate person is a very good one.
The awful events, unspeakable events of July 24, but if one postulates what would have happened had there been an attack by AR on another pupil in Pressfield, when this risk information hadn't actually been received, hadn't been viewed, and AR would have been judged not to be a suitable pupil for Pressfield. Just thinking about that underlines how significant a risk and a problem that could have been. Would you agree?
Yes.
So would that be an appropriate moment? We're making good progress, but perhaps 45 minutes? Certainly. So I'll sit again at 10 to. Thank you.